So there are three news stories that are coming out right now that I think are more important than the Putin speech. And the media is drowning out these stories with the Putin speech and the START and treaty stuff. And I talked about that in my previous video, why I thought that whole speech was a big bag of nothing. It was underwhelming. And the whole START treaty thing is also a nothing burger in and of itself. So if you want to see my feelings on that, go to my previous video. But these three news stories have direct implications when it comes to Ukraine as well as Iran and Israel, etc. And these are all showing up today. So the first one, not as huge of a deal, but is a bigger deal in the grander foreign policy ambitions of the collective West, this coalition we formed to counter Russia, in that Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni is visiting Ukraine today. She went to Kyiv to visit with President Zelensky. And that's a significant step because a lot of people thought that she would be anti-Ukraine. She would be someone who would want to cut off support to Ukraine, but that has not been the case, despite the fact that she is a right-leaning candidate or right-leaning prime minister in Italy. And actually some people in her party have expressed the want to cut off aid to Ukraine. She has not done it, and in fact has doubled down by herself visiting Kyiv to potentially express and give more aid, which is what's going on. She has said that she's going to give more aid to Ukraine. And I think what she's realizing is being a part of the collective coalition that is countering Russia is going to be more valuable going forward to Italy with regard to relationships formed with the United Kingdom, the European Union really writ large, as well as the United States. That's more valuable than whatever relationships are going to come from essentially what's going to be a fractured Russia here in the future. And speaking of fractured Russia, I want to talk about the second news story that I'm seeing, and that's a lot of these intercepted messages that are coming out from Wagner Group, specifically from Prigozhin himself, who's the leader of Wagner Group, talking about how the Russian military is not supporting his logistics needs, and they have flat out cut off artillery for any kind of infantry advance for Wagner Group. And without any kind of artillery cover, the infantry is walking in absolutely unprotected. They will be wiped out, and they're using these human wave tactics, and it's not working. And largely it's because Wagner Group doubled down on this prison inmate training system, and it's failed catastrophically, as we've seen. The Wagner Group has really struggled to take anything despite having some numerical superiority. And now Russia is trying to replace Wagner Group in those areas in real time while fighting this war. It's not going to turn out very well. Well, the reason for this is you see a lot of these fracturing factions. Wagner Group and Prigozhin himself and some of the other leaders in Wagner Group have come out and made some pretty disparaging comments of the Kremlin, of the military leaders, stopping short of criticizing Putin himself, but it's still significant. And because of that, people got sick and tired of it in the Kremlin, and they've cut him off completely from support from the Russian military. Well, I think what's happening is a lot of these organizations are getting too big for their britches in Putin's eyes. He's seeing, like Kadyrov said, he's going to build a private military company. If you don't remember, he's the leader of Chechnya, and he's going to have his own private military. And Gazprom said they're going to build up their own private military for defending pipelines. And then Sergei Shoigu has his own private military company called Patriot. So we're seeing these quote unquote private military companies, but really they're building individual armies around powerful entities: Wagner Group, Gazprom, Chechnya, Sergei Shoigu. And then you have the Kremlin that is its own, obviously has the Russian military. And therefore there's some cracks forming here. There's some lines being drawn. There's some conglomeration of calling the troops, so to speak, where there might be some interesting power plays up to and including some really scary infighting within these groups, because a lot of these groups don't like each other. And it's showing that the Kremlin has turned its back on Wagner Group, but Wagner Group is still very powerful and actually has quite a bit of support up to and including in the State Duma of Russia. So Not sure how that's going to play out, but this is a significant news story. And then finally, I think the most significant news story we're seeing comes out of Israel, but it directly affects Russia. In that, U.S. Ambassador Israel Tom Nides said that the Iran nuclear deal is currently on ice, and the U.S. will not directly negotiate with Iran while it's supplying Russia with drones for use in the war in Ukraine. He went on to say the Iranians are providing drones to Russia, and those drones are killing innocent Ukrainians. There's no chance today of going back to the negotiating table. He went on. He also said that, as President Joe Biden has said, we will not stand by and watch Iran get a nuclear weapon, number one. And then number two, he said all options are on the table for the U.S. And number three, Israel can and should do whatever they need to deal with Iran, and we've got their back. This is essentially the U.S. saying, Israel, do what you need to do, and we aren't going to stop you, which is a major official shift in what was an unofficial policy of the U.S., Iranian, Israeli relations, where the U.S. kind of held Israel on a leash. Well, the minute Iran started supplying these drones to Russia to fight in Ukraine, the U.S. said, screw it, Israel, do what you need to do, and we're not going to stop you, nor are we even going to protest. Now, this is something we may want to revisit down the road, but it basically tells Israel, hey, if you got cybersecurity or cyber attack systems that you want to implement, you want to covertly blow up their sites, you want to do whatever you want to do, the U.S. is essentially turning a blind eye. And this is a part of the broader U.S. divorce from the Middle East. Ever since the shale revolution, which many people talk about, the U.S. has not really needed the Middle East as much. So our security concerns in the Middle East are very small compared to what they were 20 years ago. So because of that, we're saying, Israel, Iran is your problem now. Deal with that as you see fit, and we've got your back. And that's giving basically Israel a blank check, something they've probably wanted for the last 30 years to deal with Iran. And here we are now with that. And absolutely part of that targeting will be drone systems built in Iran, because Iran uses those drones in Syria against Israeli and U.S. interests. Not only do they, and then they sell the excess to Russia. So whatever that drone manufacturing capability is probably going to be a target, and that's a big deal, in which Israel is probably going to take the gloves off when it comes to Iran, but also is going, because of this goodwill gesture, so to speak, on trusting Israel to deal with Iran. I think that's going to bring Israel over into Russia needs to stop its war campaign, period. So those are the three bigger news stories, I think, than Putin's speech. And I just wanted to tell you guys about them because they're pretty significant. I think they're all big deals when it comes to signaling foreign policy, changing the course of certain countries' views on Russia, as well as the internal politics and PMC, private military company / security / military apparatus that is currently happening in Russia. So there you go.